Hi, welcome to Push with Love. Today we have Dave Roberts. Dave, how are you doing today?
I am doing very well, Micah. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for joining me. And please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you have passion for.
Wow. Um, I just had my 70th birthday in June, and I tell individuals that all the time that I don't know how I've lived this long this quickly. I don't feel like I lived 70 years, but I have. I'm a retired addictions counselor, and I'm a licensed master social worker. I have a master's in social work degree from SUNY Albany. I worked in the addictions field for 27 years, and many of my clients had also coexisting mental health um, disorders as well. I am very passionate right now about working with young adults and doing bereavement support because of my own challenges with grief, and just because I also believe that the young adults are our future. So I'm very committed to giving them the best possible teaching experience that I can and learning experience for them, and sharing my experiences in addition to textbook stuff that hopefully they'll take some life lessons away from them. I teach part-time at two different universities. I teach at Utica University in Utica, New York, and I also teach a group of artists at the Pratt Munson School of Art in Utica, New York. I teach a couple of different psychology courses, so I've worked very closely, with artists in an academic field, and they have quite a different mentality, and they have a different set of experiences that they bring in than just a typical college student. I'm no stranger to loss. I've danced with death since I've been 5 years old, but that would be probably Micah for another podcast.
Very good, very good. I have to agree. I feel like the youth is our future, especially when it comes to artists. And we have to keep continuing to encouraging them to express themselves and push the boundaries of truth.
Well, absolutely. And I think you take a look at any type of artistry, whether it's painting, whether it's illustration, whether it's graphic design, whether it's music, the best artists and the best musicians I know have pushed the boundaries, have gotten us to think, and have gotten us to really, I think, reevaluate ourselves. And a lot of times we can resonate with the pain in a piece of art, the pain in music, the pain of a particular performer, because it helps us get in touch with our own pain. And that's something that I think really needs to be looked at, to be considered, particularly when you take a look at all the judgmental stuff with music critics, with art critics about a particular piece of art. Hey, we're different strokes for different folks. What appeals to one person it may not appeal to somebody else, but it doesn't mean it's a bad piece of art or it's got to be canceled
Yeah,
or it's got to be tossed to the side.
yeah. It would just be a shame to waste art.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about the artists and their perception, and I'm sure you have a lot of experience with different artists and how it differs from, let's say, most of the population, their perception on life.
I think the students that I work with at Pratt, I work with probably a lot more international students at Pratt than I do at Utica University. I've had individuals that have come from South Korea, from Pakistan, from China, and they bring a very unique cultural perspective, not only to their art, but to the classroom. Their experiences, I think, tend to be a little bit more diverse, probably more advanced for their age, because I think because of their art, they've put themselves in creative situations where they're going to be exposed to a greater variety or subsection of a population. Um, and so, I mean, I had a student quote Confucian history in a 500-word reaction paper at the Pratt School of Art. They're also very kinesthetic. They're very multisensory. They're very multidimensional. They're very intuitive. And a lot of times they're misunderstood because of that, because of how they see the world. And they tend to be, I don't want to say canceled, but they tend to be looked at as having a mental illness, when in fact they don't have a mental illness, when in fact that they just process information multidimensionally. They may be able to see other worlds simultaneously, connect with other worlds simultaneously. So the way they process information and the way they see their current existence is going to be a lot different than an individual who's more grounded in this world.
Yeah, very well put. That's the one thing I wanted to touch on today was how the perception of the artist tends to be labeled as unstable by, let's say, most of the population that not necessarily has the same experience as an artist when it comes to the worldview and how they express themselves. And if they express themselves in some abstract way, then they tend to be labeled as schizophrenic or psychotic or unstable. And it's really, is it a way to just control them? Is it a way of just because it's fear, like a side effect of fear? Or is it something else? Is it like ignorance? This is something I'd love to dive into.
I think the first factor is fear. Anything that is different from what we are normally accustomed to is going to be feared. So we tend to reject it. We tend to project our own fears in terms of, well, this piece of information or art or music is crap. It doesn't apply to me. It's worthless. And essentially, what we project on any piece of art or any type of music is a reflection of how we see the world. So I think that's part of it, is that the fear of experiencing something different. Um, I think the other thing is that for me, you take a look at, I look at art, and you and I can look at a piece of art, and we could have a totally different interpretation of it. But doesn't mean it's wrong. No, it just means it's our interpretation, based on our own experiences, based on what we're going through at the moment. And I think one of the problems that we see is that we live in a world right now that's so polarized that if you don't believe in my position, there's something wrong with you. That my position is the only way to look at a situation, when in reality it isn't. There are many different ways to look at a piece of art. There's many different ways to look at a particular situation. It's everything can work if we just decide that we want to sit and bear witness to it. You might see something differently than me, but it's my job to understand how you see that differently. What are your experiences that have contributed to you seeing this piece of art differently from me, but not to judge it and say, well, your experiences are invalid, because I can't consensually validate your own subjective experience. But what I can do is simply sit and try to understand it and perhaps maybe learn from it. And what that's going to bring is a community of, we're going to find commonality in a community where we can also respect difference.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I absolutely agree. I feel like the more dialogue that we have, or conversation to share perspective openly and safely without judgment or fear or the need to try to label, I think that will just encourage less of the polarity that you were talking about and more unity. And I think that's really what the world needs at the moment, especially our culture, is we need more unity and less polarity. And it also reminded me of how in the old days it would just label you automatically the enemy if you had a different perspective, and that goes back into many times in history where we could pick out times where people would just automatically label you the enemy if you had a simple difference in opinion or perspective.
Yep.
So when you're approaching this with students or artists, do you have kind of a feeling or a perspective on the approach or the tools used to kind of diagnose artists or their perspective? And do you feel like the methods today are harmful or are they helpful?
I think we live in a society where diagnostic labeling is kind of rewarded, I think, both monetarily and the fact that everybody likes to throw a label on something. So and as a clinician, I worked with diagnostic labels, particularly so that our agency could get reimbursement so that we could provide services that were necessary. But one of the mistakes that we can make is to see people as a diagnostic label, to see a person as simply a behavior that they exhibit. What are the unique gifts that person has? We need to look at who the person is, and if we're looking at a behavior that is atypical, we treat the behavior not at the expense of the self-esteem of an individual. But here's the other thing: is that in order for us to get away from labeling, we have to really sit down with somebody and understand their perspective. Contextually, socially, what has contributed to their view of the world. Um, I've had students tell me who have, and I value multidimensional thinking. We talk about intuitiveness in a lot of my classes, and the fact that a lot of times intuition is better than just simply facts that are grounded in reality to get us to a particular point. And when we talk about the intuition side of us, the spiritual side of us, I've had students come up to me and actually have thanked me because they have not been given permission to really express that side of themselves. And if they're not given permission to express that side of themselves, they're going to any way time that they see the world that's different from the way rational science sees it, they're going to be viewed as an abnormality. They're going to be viewed as something to be feared, when in fact they should be viewed as a person to be revered and learn from. Because I've told people, Mike, in my own, and I'm very much science based. I believe in science, but I also believe that there's a room for spiritual practices to integrate with science to explain how we see the world. I have individuals in my support circle who are extremely intuitive, who are extremely grounded, and are a combination of both, and it all works because I learn from all of it. So we need to get past the labels and understand how the person sees the world, what has influenced the way that they've seen the world. Are they ADHD? They may not be, although there's some people who are highly sensitive, are very intuitive, that are ADHD, but not everybody is. So we need to understand who that person is, where they come from, what their influences are, and screw the labeling. That's what I say.
Very well put. I agree. I feel like that would be the best route, would be just getting the conversation to kind of truly understand the person. And then if they do have, like you said, atypical behaviors, focus on those rather than just labeling, because that doesn't really help them in the long run. Or medication. Overly medicating a person just because they have an atypical behavior not necessarily helps them. It just simply dulls their behavior. And then, you have, all sorts of other side effects and problems then. So if we could approach the idea of, um, I don't know, kind of implementing a new perspective into our culture of conversation and encouraging the expression of artists, what would you say would be a factor that would be needed to kind of alter the perception of society in order to become more, I don't know, open to the artist's perception of the world?
I think one is what we talked about before, is establish a culture where we're listening to each other, understand what the artist's perspective is in terms of what what motivated that piece, what stimulated that piece, what was the influence behind that piece. And I always take an interest in my students' art at Pratt, and I'll ask them. I'll say, "Boy, this looks pretty cool. Tell me how you got the idea for this." And they'll tell me. And the other thing, if you want to really get to understand an artist piece, look at their artist statement. I tell my students, if you especially if they're displaying their art in galleries and are looking to sell art, I said, writing is going to be an important tool, and your artist statement is going to it's going to give the individual the context for that piece and decide whether or not that piece is going to align with how they see the world. And if it doesn't, fine, they feel free to walk away. The mistake we make is that we start being critical. And there's this like battle for relevancy, I think, in this society where everybody's got to have a voice. And I read a meme somewhere, I think it was on Facebook, that said maturity is realizing that not everything requires your comment. And there's sometimes what we need to do is just shut up, appreciate what we see, understand where that artist is coming from, and then just be grateful that they graced us with a part of their story that for them is probably very intimate, and then just go. Just move on and just establish that culture of tolerance and understanding. Because what you believe, Micah, might be different than what I believe, but does it make it bad? No. It just makes it different. I don't have to judge what you believe. What you believe is what you believe. It's what can I learn from that? What can I learn from any piece of art that's going to improve my quality of life? Here's the thing about art: if it doesn't resonate with you, you can find a piece of art that will. And for artists that are not being heard, there's going to be a community of individuals that will be receptive. For one person or one community that is not receptive to their message, there's going to be another community that's going to be. Um, and so I would encourage them to trust in their instinctual gifts, trust in their talent, and find a community that is going to appreciate and support what they're doing without judging it. Um, and I think, the artists that I've talked to are just really creative, very neat, and have a very unique perspective on how they see the world. And it comes out in their writing, it comes out in their conversations. And we, I think, as a society, are really selling ourselves short. We're losing out if we don't get a chance to sit down and understand the actual muse behind the artist and understand how they see the world. We're losing out.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I feel like if we could find a way to implement artistry and artists into all aspects of life, rather than kind of pushing them aside as just simply the crazy people that entertain us, it would be a lot more helpful, especially in business and pretty much all aspects of life, because they offer the opportunity to have perspective that let's say the majority of people don't have. They can see things that others can't see, and then they
Mm-hmm.
can apply it, which is invaluable if you only think in black and white.
Yep.
And I agree. I feel like when an artist shares a piece of art with the community, it is an intimate experience. So it's a gift that they are giving to the world. So to dismiss it or label the individual is really a mistake.
Yep.
It's an opportunity to connect with that person rather than label and judge.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, what if there was a world of people that were just like you and me? It'd be a very dull world. So I mean, uniqueness and variety makes the world go around. And you take a look at some of the best artists. You take a look at Van Gogh. I think Van Gogh is a tortured soul, and that came out in his art. And he experienced numerous losses and a lot of difficult. We would call them now adverse childhood experiences, but they wouldn't call it in the days of Van Gogh. We wouldn't call it back then. But I take a look at one of my favorite artists of the Counting Crows, Adam Duritz. He had a very, very long struggle with mental health challenges, and I think with addiction, and that came out in his writing, and it came out in some of the best work that he did post addiction and post mental illness. And some of the music critics didn't care for the structure of that CD or that album, but I listened to it and I thought it was one of the best works they had done since the early '90s when they did August and Everything After, which was their signature album, because you could see his pain and his recovery being channeled in that. To me, that's great art. Now, a music critic might see it as being mundane, might see it as being self-serving. I saw it as being healing, which is another reason I don't listen to a lot of what music critics have to say about a particular piece of music, because it's just their own perception. They may be catering to a specific audience that's expecting a specific point of view. For me, if I like it, if it resonates, I'm going to listen to it. If I don't, I'm not going to, but I'm not going to sit and go on social media and just say, boy, this album was a real piece of crap. Because what may be my piece of crap to me may be somebody else's treasure. And I never want to disrespect that.
Mm. Yes, absolutely. I agree. I feel like when we let other people think for us, it's not really the best route. And listening to a critic decide what is good and then deciding it's not good because a critic said so or because of the population saying so. So if you could offer some advice to, let's say, an artist, a young person that is listening and is afraid to express themselves because of the fact that society is so judgmental and polarity at the moment with societal expectations and labels. What would you say to young artists that want to express themselves but they're afraid?
Let your faith be greater than your fear. Trust your inherent talents. And I tell my students, I said, I'm in awe. And these are 19 and 20-year-old students, Micah, that are just gifted artists. I say, I'm in awe of the work that you do. Use your art to better the world. Use your art. Make a social statement. Don't let anybody steal your mojo with anything. You trust your inherent gifts. Trust yourself. Trust that for every critic of your art, there's going to be one or two other people that are going to love your art. And that's all that you need. Um, don't do art to please everybody because that's not going to happen. Do it from your heart. Do it in a way that reveals your true artistic expression and personality and reflects what you want to put out in the world. Because what you put out in the world, you can never take back. So make sure it is authentic. Make sure that you're true to yourself doing it, and screw anybody else that doesn't agree with your perspective. As long as you are coming from a position that is consistent with your values, and your values aren't steeped in hurting yourself or anybody else, it's all good. Um, Trust yourself, trust your instincts, and put out something that reflects the type of legacy you want to leave.
Beautiful, beautiful. I absolutely agree. I feel like the more we encourage the young people to just have less fear about being themselves, the better the future is going to be.
Yeah.
Instead of falling in line and listening to what everybody else is doing or being afraid, having faith that it's okay to be yourself and
Yep.
it's okay to not be liked. It's okay not to fit in. It's one of those things that I think kind of holds a lot of young people back is that fear of judgment or being isolated because you're different.
Well, the
I,
other thing with oh, God, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, you go ahead.
The other thing with young adults, they're facing a lot of pressures with college, with a lot that's going on in the world, with the misinformation on social media, with social media in general, and they want to be creative, they want to have their talent shine, but they also want to be part of a group, and that peer acceptance is so important. So they struggle with that. Um, but in reality, it's like, you know, be true to yourself. Do what is going to make you feel the happiest. Do what is going to put a smile on your face. And also don't be afraid to embrace the dark side of your ass, because we can learn more from the darkness than we can from the light. And let that come out in your work. Let that come out in who you are. If you can embrace the darkness for the gifts that it has to hold, if you can understand that sadness can breed compassion, that confusion can lead to introspection. If you can look at all parts of yourself and let that channel in your art, your statement is going to be genuine, your legacy is going to be genuine, and you're going to be true to yourself.
Beautiful. I absolutely agree. I feel like the artist that denies their darkness is only half an artist.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel that we've definitely touched on a lot of great topics today, and I really appreciate your time and your wisdom. Thank you again for joining me and sharing your perspective on all these subjects. This is definitely something that I think about regularly, is how the pressure of societal expectations on an artist because of their perception of the world, or if they're neurodivergent,
Yep.
or if they just are a little bit quirky and different. The isolation that comes with that judgment and that labeling, and then that could easily lead to depression and potentially suicide, which is probably common in statistics with artists. It's
Yep.
probably a common thing. So thank you again for your time. I really appreciate this. Uh, if you have anything that you'd like to say to close us out, please go ahead.
Um, Show grace to yourself, be true to yourself, and love yourself, because you can't begin to love your art or love anybody else unless you love yourself.
Absolutely. Push with love.
You got it. Yeah. So the theme of the podcast.
Theme of the podcast. We're just pushing with love here. Thank you again. This has been Pushed with Love, Dave Roberts. Please remember to like and subscribe. Until next time.
Bye bye.